My name is Rebecca Johnson, and I love Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. And I am publishing a series of videos exploring the reasons why I am such a fan of Zack Snyder's film. In this series, you'll find my thoughts on topics that matter to me, like Larry Fong's cinematography, character analysis on Lex Luthor and Lois Lane, the Christian imagery, what I find hopeful about the movie, and yes, I'll address the critical reception. So if you're interested in any of those topics, I hope you will get something out of this series and find out why Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice has had such a profound, heartfelt, and inspiring impact on my life. Welcome to the Duck Milk Pride YouTube channel. My name is Rebecca Johnson, and this live stream is part of a series I am calling Reading Reviews with Rebecca, which will analyze the critical reception of Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice through the negative reviews written by top critics from Rotten Tomatoes, one review at a time. Now, this is not meant to belittle anyone's opinions, but rather serve as a study of art criticism and how we discuss film. I am hoping that this endeavor will encourage all of us to be better consumers of cinema, myself included. This week, I'll be reading through a review from the Detroit News titled Batman v Superman is an Exhausting Showdown, written by Adam Graham, who has apparently, according to his profile on the Detroit News website, only been a film critic since 2016, which of course would put this review of Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice as one of his firsts. You can click on the link in the video description below if you'd like to follow along and read it for yourself, which I encourage you to do so, just so that you can see it's a real review and I'm not making any of this up, because you might question it later. But you can click on it and read Adam's review for yourself. If Adam should ever see this video, I just want to say that I'm aiming to do this as civilly and analytically as possible, and I would ask that anyone watching live or posting in the comment section would do the same. I'm simply taking a look at the criticism for and of BVS now from an historical point of view, given that these reviews were used by Warner Brothers in their decision-making process regarding the DC Extended Universe. Due to the poor reviews for Batman v Superman, the tone and approach to the franchise were changed for Justice League and ultimately led to the destruction of the Snyderverse and the Zack Snyder 5-film arc that had been planned, and the DC Extended Universe as we knew it back then. Before I get into Adam's thoughts, though, I'm sure there are some viewers who might think, well, this is a film critic. He may have only really started writing reviews at the time that BVS came out, but still, he wrote for the Detroit News. It's a major news outlet who's included on Rotten Tomatoes. So who cares what you have to say, Rebecca? And you know what? I think that is a fair question. If I was not doing this, I would be asking the same question. So I think it's a good one. So I have some information about my background to help you understand some of the things that I can bring to the table. I graduated from the University of Alabama, Roll Tide, with a degree in telecommunications and film and a focus on broadcast television production. While I've never been to film school, in my television and production experience, I've learned about and have lots of practice in operating cameras, shot composition, and editing. Lighting, green screen, and audio are my weak spots, admittedly, but I've been working on those. After working in local TV news, running cameras, and working in production, I got a job at Turner, now Warner Media, or whatever they're calling themselves now, for 14 years. I worked with networks, or brands as they call them now, like TBS, TNT, Adult Swim, Cartoon Network, Boomerang, True TV, and Turner Classic Movies as a video encoding specialist. I also did a fair amount of closed captioning work and DVD and Blu-ray QC. In case you are wondering how I podcasted about Supergirl and the DCEU films while working for a Time Warner company, I actually got permission and clearance from my human resources representative. If you think I wouldn't criticize stories that were under the same corporate umbrella, that was never a problem nor a concern for me. If I thought the Supergirl TV series or a DCEU film had faults, I said so. In the last 17 years, I have served as a director, technical director, and camera operator at my local church in a live production capacity. I've been a video editor for 17 years, having worked in Avid, Final Cut, and Premiere Pro CC. In my day job, I shoot and edit news and documentary-style video content that involves interviews and narrative storytelling. I'm also currently an amateur photographer and am aiming to improve my efforts in still photography. You can check out my work over at Instagram at The Derby Kid. Link is in the video description below. While discussing these film reviews, music and film scores will inevitably come up. It may be good to know that in my life I have played piano, clarinet, bassoon, acoustic guitar, and have even started learning how to play the ukulele. I've played in marching bands, symphonic bands, and wind ensembles, and have sung in many choirs. While I don't consider myself a world-class musician, far from it actually, I do know some things about music and am a big fan of film scores and soundtracks. In addition to my production and musical experience, I have had lots of experience in art criticism. I've been podcasting about television and film since 2009 and do so on a regular basis with Supergirl Radio, a podcast I co-host about the CW Supergirl TV series. I am also a writing contributor to the Justice League Universe podcast that offers analysis on the DCEU films. You might even hear my voice occasionally in recordings and audio commentaries over there. I'm not an expert, but I care deeply about film, television, storytelling, and art. So I hope this gives you a background on where I'm coming from. All right, now that we have that out of the way, let's get into Adam's review in the Detroit News. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is the title of the review. The title is Batman v Superman is an Exhausting Showdown. I'm a little exhausted by this title. It's not particularly exciting or creative, but I guess at least it gives me an idea about where Adam is headed with his thoughts. So even though I don't find it very unique, a lot of these reviews don't have very good titles, which is disappointing because that's the first thing that's going to grab somebody when they click on this review. So I guess that's at least something to help us understand where we're going to be going in this review. So I guess maybe we'll keep an eye out for the reasons why it's an exhausting showdown. We'll have to get to that. Okay, so Adam in the body of the review starts off saying, quote, "The heavyweight title bout between Batman and Superman is a smash to the senses, the same way being tossed around in a rollover car accident would jolt one's system," unquote. So for me, in my opinion, a quote smash to the senses unquote sounds awesome and is a solid definition of the big Batman and Superman fight at the end of the film. So I don't really take that as a negative. I think that sounds awesome. I would love every film to be a smash to the senses. But never once while watching Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice did I ever feel like I was, quote, being tossed around in a rollover car accident, unquote. I've actually been in a pretty significant car accident myself. Miraculously came away unscathed except for one bruise on my back, but I did a full I don't know how many 360s I did on the interstate. I sort of swerved from another car that I thought was coming into my lane, so I was trying to swerve to avoid the car, and I ended up somehow, because of the speed and the way I turned the steering wheel, I started doing 360s in the interstate and somehow got turned around in the median. I ended up in the median, turned the opposite way of the traffic, but I was out of the way of the other cars and I had no injuries and I didn't hit anyone else. And it was a complete miracle. So I've actually been in a pretty significant car accident that totaled my car, and it was pretty bad. It could have been much more serious than it was. So it's kind of silly to me to read, having been in such a bad car accident as I was. I think it was in 2006, if I remember correctly, August 2006. It was like 6 months after my dad died. That's how I remember that. And so so I've been in a bad car accident. So for Adam to evoke his disgust with Batman v Superman, saying it's like being in a really terrible auto accident, is so I don't want to say offensive to me, but I think it's so hyperbolic that it is to me that I throw that away. Like that's not anything of any real significance to me. It's also something that I think is not actually being fair to the film. I at no point when I was watching BVS did I ever think, man, this is giving me PTSD flashbacks of that terrible auto accident I had that I was in 2006. It's not a good critique. And I'm trying to be fair to Adam because it seems like he first started being a film critic in 2016 when this film came out. But it's so unfair in terms of what an auto accident really is. And I know he's trying to use metaphors and all that kind of thing. He's not saying it's exactly like being in a rollover car accident, but maybe find a better way to express your disgust in that. People have gotten injured in car accidents. I had a small bruise, thankfully, miraculously. I can only say there was some sort of divine intervention in that car accident, because I should have maybe died in that car accident. But people have gotten hurt. People have died in car accidents too. So reading that, comparing that, watching a film, especially like BVS, which is just a it's just a fantastic film, and to compare it to something to where people have injured or been injured or have died in, is such a strange critique to me. I don't even know why you would use it, but I think Adam's trying to go into this talking about how it's such a jolt to the senses. It's like being in a car accident. No, it's not. You're just you're being hyperbolic about it. I'm sorry. It's such a strange critique to me. Okay. And having said all of that, what did Adam want the Batman and Superman fight to be like? He didn't want it to be, it seems like, a smash to the senses. He didn't want it to be so intense that it would feel like it was a jolt to your system. So I'm curious about Adam's expectations for the Batman and Superman fight. These are the two most famous superheroes in all of comics. I know that the MCU films are a big deal, and the MCU cinematic universe, is such a huge thing. But Batman and Superman, two most iconic characters in all of comics, not even just DC comics period. So if you're gonna have the two characters fight in a film, it should be, as Lex Luthor describes in BVS, the greatest gladiator match in the history of the world. It should be the most epic, drag out, uh senses smashing fight there has ever been. And I think Zack Snyder really tried to live up to that. And I think it's really well worth the watch, because they took such care to make it such a big deal, and to have Batman win a little bit and Superman win a little bit. And of course, at the end, it could be argued that Batman probably would have won if Lois Lane hadn't stepped in, literally. But I think it's supposed to be an intense showdown. So I don't know what Adam here was expecting from the fight. Was he wanting it to just be like a punch and then that's it? Like, I don't know what he expected. So that's just it's interesting to me, because I wanted, even even I was like, oh, this better be good. So I guess that goes down to expectations. But I think if you're going to put these two big um, iconic comic book characters in a fight together, it should be something of significance. Okay, continuing on, Adam writes, quote, "That is the level of roaring, unrelenting punishment acted out in director Zack Snyder's Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, which is at once overstuffed and undercooked," unquote. When I read the word overstuffed, it seemed familiar to me from these reviews. And it's a good thing that I take the notes. I copy and paste all of the reviews into Google Docs. And the reason that I do that is so I have a search capability function. I have the ability to type in a word. I create a database for myself. So I can type in a word in my Google Docs, and it will bring up the results of everything that I have in my Google Docs using that word, which is very convenient for a project like this, because then I can go back and reference whatever it was that was connected to that word. So turns out, even just from the ones that we've already gone through, I'm sure overstuffed possibly is used in other reviews that we have in the future. But even just in the ones we've already gone through here on the youtube.com/duckmilkprod YouTube channel, this is not Adam's review from the Detroit News is not the first of these from Rotten Tomatoes, the top critics, to write that watching BBS was a form of, quote, punishment, unquote. The Fort Worth Star Telegram wrote, quote, this is a film where the punishment isn't just shared among the stars, unquote. The San Diego Reader described Batman v Superman as, quote, well, this is the line from the review. Never mind dreary to look at and punishing to hear, unquote. The Washington Post complained about the runtime with saying, quote, at a punishing 2.5 hours, unquote. And the Atlantic talked about Hans Zimmer's clamorous, punishing score, which is interesting to me. And I'm a little perplexed by this because my question to this is, why is it that all of these reviews use the word punishment or a variation thereof, talking about punishing, it using as a description for some of these things? Why do they use the word punishment when the definition of the word means, quote, suffering pain or loss that serves as retribution, unquote? Or this is another definition for punishment, quote, a penalty inflicted on an offender through judicial procedure, unquote. Well, given those definitions, I'm wondering, have these reviewers done something wrong that required retribution? Did they do something that required them to have a penalty put on them? So I'm very curious about the use of the word punishment, because they obviously seem to think that they have done something wrong that necessitated them to have some sort of punishment. The writers, though, probably mean it in terms of this definition of the word punishment, which is, quote, severe, rough, or disastrous treatment, unquote. But I still think it's interesting that if you read it in this light, it's acknowledging by the reviewers themselves that they have done something that requires retribution. So they must have done something in the first place to deserve punishment. So I think that is really interesting. But getting to the word overstuffed and also the word undercooked. Undercooked, I haven't gotten as much in terms of the results in my little database, but overstuffed, some things popped up because it did seem familiar to me. So I'm looking. I'm possibly, hopefully, we'll get to Adam's case for why it's overstuffed. But so hopefully, we're going to get to that in this review. But he's not the first one to use the word overstuffed when talking about Batman v Superman. Vulture had it in the title, which was the overstuffed Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice builds a world, but is it one we want? Question mark. The San Diego Reader wrote, quote, in a word, exhausting. In a few more, overblown, overstuffed, repetitive, bombastic, and sometimes just dumb, unquote. The New York Times wrote, quote, I wouldn't dream of denying you the thrill of discovering just how overstuffed and preposterous a movie narrative can be, unquote. These are not unique or new ideas. These ways of describing the film are not new. They seem to be used over and over again. And it almost comes across to me like they were given like a press release or talking points. It's just funny to me. And that's tinfoil hat time. Because it is very curious to me that they would all use the word overstuffed. So maybe overstuffed is a word that we will continue to track here on Reading Reviews with Rebecca, because I'm very interested to see if more reviews that we go through will have that wording. All right, continuing on with Adam's review, he writes, quote, the movie crams together a Batman story, a Superman story, and lays the groundwork for several side tales, all in the space of a cluttered 2.5-hour collision that aims to bludgeon viewers into submission, unquote. So again, another very violent description of watching this film. I don't understand why it's so violent to people. I guess they just watch the fight scenes, and that's what stuck with them. Not to mention the really quiet, reverent parts of this film, which there are quite many of. But yeah, so that's a pretty funny to me that it seems like a lot of these reviewers just want to focus on the loud, violent bits of the film, when that's not even a clear, accurate depiction of the entirety of the film. And Adam seems like he's telling us why he thinks things are overstuffed here. So I guess that this is his argument for why things are overstuffed, even though it's kind of vague and not really going into a lot of specifics here. But let's get into some of his reasoning for why he believes that BVS is overstuffed. So he's writing here that this review is telling me that Dawn of Justice has a Batman story. Okay, all right. So Batman's in the title. He's one of the main characters. So, okay, there's a story for Batman in this film. And then it has a Superman story. Well, Superman's also in the title. He's one of the main characters in the film. Superman story. That sounds great to me. And so I don't understand why it's a problem that both Batman and Superman have stories in a film about them where they are the main characters and are also in the title of the film. Is that a negative? I would expect going into the film, even not having seen it, to expect a story about Batman and about Superman because of their existence in the title and the fact that they are main characters. And I think that there is, from my point of view, a case to be made about this is why this is a great film, because it does give you a Batman story and a Superman story. And it actually tells you things about those characters. It's not as if they were in the film and they didn't have any kind of story. Like, it should have a story about them in the film if they're main characters. So I don't exactly understand why Adam thinks that this is a negative for the film. He also brings up, he writes, quote, lays the groundwork for several side tales, unquote. So this apparently is also a negative for Adam. But he uses the word groundwork, which I think is a particular interest to me, because he's not saying that the side tales are a prominent aspect of the film. They're just the groundwork, the building blocks. They're starting something. They're kind of building the framework of a story that's going to be structured and told later. Also, not a negative. Also, not a negative. That is not a negative at all. BVS sets things up for characters to have their own films that we saw, like with Wonder Woman 2017 and with Aquaman when Aquaman came out. This is the groundwork that it's building towards something for the future. And it also builds the groundwork for more films connected to this one, to BVS, which Zack Snyder's Justice League is connected to BVS, and specifically and intentionally so. And I also don't see that as a negative, especially given the MCU and the other cinematic universe within the comics world. Somehow this happens a lot with these reviews, is that they will make these things seem like a negative when the MCU did it, and it wasn't a problem with the MCU somehow. All right, I'm gonna fix my headphones. Give me 1 second. I occasionally will have issues where my headphones slide down because I have a small head. My headphones are so big. But yeah, so it's not a problem when the MCU does it, but it's somehow a really negative, horrible thing when Zack Snyder does it. I think that's something to point out. Adam also uses the phrase, quote, bludgeon viewers into submission, unquote. This also sounded familiar to me, so I went into my trusty Google Docs to see if I could find a phrase similar. And I did, from the Fort Worth Star Telegram. This was in that review. Quote, technically, Dawn of Justice is proficient, but after about an hour, viewers might feel as if they had been clobbered into submission, unquote. So that seems to be a recurring theme in these reviews, that somehow viewers are supposed to be clobbered into submission by this film. I don't exactly know how that works, because it's just telling a story. So so there is that. All right, continuing on into Adam's review. He writes, quote, it's a lot, and yet the experience is rather empty. Underneath all the smashing and crashing, there isn't much there. I think there should be, Adam, a comma after crashing, but that's just how I would edit that in. That's also probably not Adam's fault. Maybe there was an editor who should have taken a look at this. Anyway, continuing on with Adam's thoughts, he writes, quote, "It is so burdened by its responsibility to set up a franchise that it barely takes the time to exist in the present. And Snyder is so encumbered by the idea that superhero films are supposed to be serious business that he forgets to have any fun. This is Batman and Superman, not a funeral procession," unquote. So I immediately went to the phrase, "the experience is rather empty." Adam seems to think there's nothing here in BBS. It's just superficial, whatever it is. He didn't get anything out of it. The experience was empty. Now, my question to this is, how is it that I, Rebecca Johnson, can find layers and layers of juicy screenwriting and meaning from the story, and Adam here cannot? Could it be that maybe you get out of a film or a story what you put into it? Maybe Adam didn't put anything into it, so he didn't get anything out of it. I get the sense, and this is just me reading this review, I don't get the sense that Adam didn't spend a lot of time with this film to find all of the layers and connect with it to find meaning. BVS is a film that gets better with repeated viewings. The more you watch it, the more you get out of it. So I'm assuming because he is a film critic, he probably only watched it once, which to me is one of the problems with film criticism, but that's for another video. Uh, but but it's only going to get better when you start connecting the dots between the writing and the cinematography and the score and the performance. All of those things go together in a really cohesive and sophisticated storytelling process with BBS. Um, and I can maybe see how one viewing of the film critic goes in, they watch it once, but maybe they're watching it this one time with a bias. Maybe they took a bias into it, already wanting to hate it. I could see how that approach to the film could maybe leave you empty while you're watching PBS. So I think that's pretty interesting to me because I'm I've been exploring the idea of meaning with stories for the last couple of years. C.S. Lewis writes about that in his an experiment in criticism book, which is a book that I'm going through yet again. This is my second read through of it because I'm going to be making notes of it to do a video of it at the end of this project because I think it has a lot of great insights about meaning and why people reread or rewatch or re-listen to something. It's because they find meaning in it. And so that this is an example of the fact that I don't think Adam found any meaning in BBS. I don't know why that is. I don't know if he didn't have the life experience that allowed him to connect with something in the film. I don't know if it's he didn't have the knowledge of certain things that were going on. This is a very intellectual film. I know a lot of people scoff at that, but you do have to have a certain amount of intelligence to watch this film. It's not something that's going to hold your hand, and that's just the truth of it. Maybe he didn't take any admiration for the characters or the way the film was made, and so he just didn't get any meaning out of it. So I think that's really interesting that me, Rebecca Johnson, found a lot of meaning in this film, and yet Adam didn't. And I'm curious as to why that is. If I was able to speak to Adam, I would want to ask him about that. Also, why is making a superhero film supposed to weigh you down? That's why Adam uses the word encumbered here. He believes that the idea of serious superhero films are a burden. I ask this question all the time with these reviews, but I guess it bears repeating since it's come up again. But why does a superhero film need to be fun? And what if I told Adam that I think there are scenes and moments in Dawn of Justice that I find fun? So I think that's it's also an perspective, and what you put into it is what you get out of it. Adam also says, quote, "This is Batman and Superman, not a funeral procession," unquote. Adam, this film begins and ends with a funeral. There's actually 3 funerals if you want to be technical about it. There's the Wayne murders at the beginning, and then there's 2 funerals at the end for Clark Kent, and then another one for Superman. So this film has 3 3 funerals in it. It's using the tone that it does because it's appropriate for the story. If you didn't want BVS to be a funeral procession, what did you want it to be? Just giggles, quick witty banter, and then just a goofy antics all the time? This is a story about the death of Superman. This is a really big deal. There should be sadness to it. I don't understand the idea that Batman v Superman should be all fun and giggles and should not be serious and should not have any sadness or grief to it. There should be sadness and grief. It's a story about death, and it's a story about the death of Superman, the greatest hero of all time. So I just don't understand this criticism. It's Adam here forcing a tone and forcing what he wants out of the film onto a film that doesn't need that. That's not appropriate for the film and for the story that they're telling. I'm going to hop in the chat real quick just to ask a question. David says, once again, we have blatant lying about objective content. If David, if you could be a little more specific about that, I'd be curious about your thoughts about what you think the lying is about. So if you can expand on that comment, that'd be great. Going back into the review, Adam writes, quote, "The film introduces Ben Affleck as Batman, and while Affleck looks good in a suit as Bruce Wayne, he doesn't have the same level of sophistication as previous Batman such as Christian Bale or Michael Keaton. He is more of a working class Bruce Wayne. He does CrossFit to train, which is very 2016 of him. And the movie relies on what we already know about Batman to fill in the gaps in his character, although it opens, as all Batman tales seem to do, with the murder of his parents," unquote. Saying that Affleck looks good in a suit as Bruce Wayne, I think somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is the first positive thing that Adam has said about Batman v Superman in this review. And I can't disagree with him here. I think Ben Affleck does look good in a suit. So I find some agreement and common ground there. But this is the first time we've read anything that's positive at all about this film. Adam also makes the claim that Ben Affleck's Batman doesn't have the, quote, sophistication, unquote, of Christian Bale or Michael Keaton. What does Adam mean here by the use of sophistication? Just to clarify that for myself, I did check it out in Merriam-Webster's dictionary. The word sophistication is defined as, quote, the process or result of becoming cultured, knowledgeable, or disillusioned, unquote. And there's also this definition, quote, the process or result of becoming more complex, developed, or subtle, unquote. Reading those 2 definitions from Merriam-Webster's dictionary about the word sophistication, Ben Affleck's Bruce Wayne and Batman fits those definitions to a T. Like, it's like reading about his storyline. He is cultured and knowledgeable. He goes toe-to-toe with Diana Prince at the fancy gala when discussing the Sword of Alexander, the blade that cut the Gordian knot. So he does have some culture and some knowledge to him. He's even disillusioned in BVS. And by disillusion, I mean, quote, lost faith or trust in something formerly regarded as good or valuable, unquote. That's the definition of disillusioned. So that also applies to Bruce Wayne and Batman in this film. So Ben Affleck's Bruce Wayne and Batman even fits the second definition. He fits the first one, and then he fits the second one of sophistication exactly. In Dawn of Justice, he is, quote, in the process or result of becoming more complex, developed, or subtle, unquote. I mean, he fits the exact definitions of sophistication, and Adam in this review claims that he does not. But I guess you see, everyone who's watching this, I guess what Adam's getting to is that Ben Affleck's Bruce Wayne is not sophisticated because you see, this is very important. He does CrossFit. He does CrossFit. That is why he is not sophisticated. And if I'm reading this correctly, Adam is claiming that Ben Affleck's Bruce Wayne is not sophisticated because he's no Christian Bale, who trained with the League of Shadows. I guess that's the comparison here. But if we're supposed to follow that logic, we never see Michael Keaton's Bruce Wayne or Batman train ever in his two movies. So how do we know that he's sophisticated if we don't have a comparison to the League of Shadows to go to? So I think this is a terrible argument because Adam is trying to shove two things together in a comparison to find any reason he can think of to negatively discuss and talk about Ben Affleck's Batman. He compares him to two different Batman and two different interpretations of the character, and then says he's not as good as one of them for a certain reason. That reason being that he didn't train with the League of Shadows, and then he says he's not as good as the other one for a completely different reason, which I'm assuming the cultured and knowledgeable part of sophistication in that characteristic of the word is referring to Michael Keaton in Batman 89 when he catches Vicky Vale and Alexander Knox talking about his international arsenal room. That's the only other way that I can see him describing Michael Keaton as sophisticated, because the comparison to the way they train, it doesn't line up. So what a weird comparison. It doesn't make sense when you actually look at the word sophisticated. So that's why I always like to go back and look at the definitions to see why they're using certain words that they do in these reviews and if they actually use them correctly. I don't even think if he used it in the way he thought it meant, just looking at Ben Affleck's story and character when he played Bruce Wayne and Batman, he fits it exactly. I don't know what Adam's saying here. I'm very confused. To continue on, Adam writes, quote, "The movie relies on what we already know about Batman to fill in the gaps in his character, although it opens as all Batman tales seem to do with the murder of his parents," unquote. This to me is hilariously contradictory. Adam doesn't want to rehash the murder of the Waynes, but then seems to consider it a negative that the movie, quote, relies on what we already know about Batman to fill in the gaps, unquote. So which is it? Which is it? I don't think you can have it both ways. So that is really funny to me. I'm going to hop back in the chat to see what David expanded on. David said that the fact that the writer can't see the funerals and think the film just feels like a funeral for no good reason. Good point. Thank you for expanding on that. Yeah, it it should feel like a funeral because it has 3 funerals in it. Ugh. Okay, continuing on with Adam's review. He writes, quote, "Henry Cavill is back as Superman, returning to the role he originated in Snyder's similarly, no, that's not right. I'm trying to make sure I read correctly. Similarly, that is a hard word for me to say as I'm reading it for some reason. Similarly, torturous. Uses the word torturous here. The similarly torturous Man of Steel, which to watch was to understand what it's like to be a pinball during a high score game. Mankind is struggling with what to make of the messianic figure and how to govern the Superman. Snyder would like to see the tale as a religious allegory, if only it were so deep." And before I finish reading his thoughts, and this was not even something I put in the notes that I wrote down, this sentence is very awkward. He writes, "Mankind is struggling with what to make of the messianic figure and how to govern the Superman." And then puts in parentheses something that's not. And maybe he should have moved the parentheses up to be next to messianic figure. I think that's the fix I would make here as an editor if I was looking at this, because it probably should read, "Mankind is struggling with what to make of the messianic figure," and then I would put, "Snyder would like to see the tale as a religious allegory, if only so deep," and then go into and how to govern the Superman. I think that makes more sense. I know I'm being really nitpicky here, but reading it out loud didn't seem to make sense. So I think I found the problem why it didn't make sense to me. Okay, continuing on with Adam's thoughts. Quote, "Among those who want Superman stopped are Lex Luthor, played with devilish glee by Jesse Eisenberg, and Batman, who decides the neighboring towns of Metropolis and Gotham City aren't big enough for the both of them, unquote. Adam considers BVS to be a punishment, and then he also considers Man of Steel to be torturous. I'm starting to get, I mean, I don't want to talk about somebody personally, but it seems to me while reading this review that Adam doesn't seem to enjoy watching movies. Like that's what I'm getting out of this as a reader, is that he does not like watching films. He's a film critic who hates watching films. I think he might have chosen the wrong career. I don't know. Maybe things have changed since 2016, but it seems like, I don't know. Is he okay? Is he being forced to write these? I don't. Is he being forced to write these reviews and watch these films? I don't know. I hope Adam is okay, because you would think, or at least I would think, and I would hope that people reviewing films would actually maybe like them, but it seems like he doesn't. I don't know. That's what I get out of it. Okay, so he writes, "Quote: Snyder would like to see the tale as a religious allegory, if only it were so deep." Unquote. Now, this line of the review in particular is, I'm going to be honest, it's pretty grating to me personally, because BVS is that deep, Adam. It is. It just is. I made a whole video about it. And I've studied the writing, the screenplay, the imagery, all of the connections to the religious allegory, and I'll talk about the phrase religious allegory in a second. But I've studied all of this. It is deep. All of these things that make it deep are there. It's not people making it up. There are things put in the film specifically to make it deep and layered. Just because you don't think it's deep doesn't mean it's not deep. There are actually things in there in the layers of the story to make it deep. So that's just a fact. Fact check, true. It is that deep. But maybe I'm just going to give Adam here the benefit of the doubt that maybe he just doesn't have the knowledge about the religious allegory that he talks about. Maybe he just doesn't know things about the descent from the cross and about Christopher Wren, and he doesn't know about the Passion of the Christ narrative, and he doesn't know about the Fortress of the Solitude and the Garden of Gethsemane. Maybe he doesn't understand that stuff. Maybe that's just not something that's maybe he's not very biblically intelligent or aware of things that are actually in the Bible. Maybe that's just not something that he's into. Maybe he doesn't understand that. Because you have to understand that kind of thing in order to understand the depth of the allegory here. It's why I think it's fascinating that I forget the organization that is doing it, but is trying to have schools, and I know there's controversy about this, but I think it's an interesting thing to discuss, that schools don't teach biblical understanding, which the reason that this organization brings it up is that in order to understand Shakespeare, you have to understand Bible stories. In order to understand certain aspects of our culture, you have to understand Bible stories. And so there's some things that just on a secular cultural level, it's important to have some biblical knowledge of things just to be able to understand films like this. So I think that's an interesting project that that organization does, because I think there's some merit to that, even if you don't want to study it for religious purposes. I think there's a merit to say, hey, you want to know more about Shakespeare? You might want to be familiar with some aspects of the Bible. So there is that. Anyway, that's a side note. But I think it's particularly fascinating here that Adam doesn't acknowledge that the quote religious allegory here is specifically Christian. This is not just like, oh, it could be any religion. No, this is very specifically Christian. And it's okay to say that. I promise you, it's okay to say it's very specifically Christian. There is a Christ figure, there is a cross and a crucifixion that is happening. There's a devil. And there's even Bibles that are in this. There's a reference to the horses, the four horsemen of the apocalypse, but also the connection to the Johnny Cash song and the Book of Revelation. There are all those things that are in there intentionally to be Christian. The the idea of the descent from the cross was actually in concept, a design stage, that they borrowed from the artistic depictions of the descent from the cross. These are very specifically Christian ideas. It's not just some quote religion, nebulous religious allegory. It's very specifically Christian. So that to me also acknowledges that maybe Adam isn't very familiar with the Christian New Testament. I'm just making assumptions here. Of course, I don't actually know Adam. I don't know his background and things. But just from the way that I'm reading this in this review and the way it's written, it leads me to believe that those are possibilities with his background. But the Christian imagery and the allegory is all very much there. There are many layers to the thematic elements of the film. The film recreates the passion of the Christ with Superman. The whole narrative is there. The film also includes a man versus God thematic element to it, where man is going up against God. Those are repeated thematic elements that come up all throughout the film. It intentionally, like I mentioned, draws on the descent from the cross, and there's even a storytelling device that goes through Batman and Bruce Wayne's character, where he is a fallen sinner redeemed by the Christ figure in Superman. But you know what? I'm sure Adam took all of that into account, right? Like he understood all of that. He got all those layers. He understood. He saw every bit of that. He understood all of that. And then he said, "It's not that deep." I'm sure he connected all those dots in his viewing. And then he was like, "You know what? I saw all of that, but I don't think it's that deep." I'm sure, right? That's got to be the case. What's wild to me here is that in this section of the review, Adam even connects the dots that Lex Luthor is representative of the devil in BVS by writing, quote, "played with devilish glee by Jesse Eisenberg," unquote. And then he chooses not to explore that. He chooses not to explore the aspect that there is a devil character in the film. He even writes about it and chooses not to go into it. He acknowledges it, but doesn't go into it. I think this is just my opinion. Uh, I think a better writer, and I hate to say this, but I think if you wanted to be a better writer in this instance, a better writer would connect those dots about the religious allegory and the fact that Jesse Eisenberg plays Lex Luthor with devilish glee. I would connect those two dots. That would be something really interesting in a movie review and a film review that I would be interested in reading, because that's someone analyzing the film. It's not just someone telling you, "Well, I hated this performance and I hated the story and I hate the director." That none of that is interesting to me. What's interesting to me is what someone got out of the story, what somebody got out of the film. How did that impact you? Even if it's negatively, talk about your perspective and not just, "Well, this just wasn't done well." That is so, to me, when I want to read something about a film, that is the least interesting aspect of a film review. I want to know what you thought about the storytelling devices, the character arcs, the filmmaking and how it was helping the story along, the score and how it connected to everything. Those are things that I think are way more interesting to me. And just as a advice to film critics, potential future film critics, if you want to stand out from the crowd, don't use overstuffed like all of these other film reviews. They're using that kind of language because they don't have anything else to say. I'm sorry, I've read so many of these reviews that they're all starting to sound the same. I don't know if anybody else who's been watching these feels the same way, but they feel that they read the same way all the time, and it's because they don't put the personal reaction of the film. They don't personally talk about, and this connects back to C.S. Lewis because I love C.S. Lewis writing so much. They don't talk about the meaning they got out of the film. That could be different for everybody because everybody brings something into a film that what I bring into the film is not what David in the chat is going to bring into the film. We're going to bring into different things and we're going to get out different things. But what sets a film critic and a film reviewer apart is the personal connection to the things and the personal ways that you analyze, the way you analyze a story. When I look at something, I try to see what I saw in it. What did I see through it in my eyes? Somebody else might see something different when they are looking at a film, but I'm taking my eyes and telling you what I saw. And that is what makes my thoughts about the film unique. It's what makes David's thoughts about the film unique. It's what anybody's thoughts are going to be unique about it, because you talk about your experience watching the film and not just, oh, it made me feel like I was in a car crash. Like actually analyzing the film, actually giving it some time to talk about it. That's what makes a good film review. And that's my rant about film critics and film reviewers. And we'll get to that at the end of this project in a probably, hopefully, a more eloquent and digestible uh, uh, critique of film criticism itself. But I think, to me, it's unfortunate with these reviews, because I read them and I think, gosh, if somebody had an editor who said, "Hey, Adam, maybe connect these dots. There's some dots here that I think you need to connect." That would make it more interesting. If somebody just said that to him and allowed him to explore that, it would set that review apart. It would make his reviews so much different. But instead, he just uses overstuffed like 3 or 4 other film critics did in other reviews. So it's disappointing to me, because I think this review isn't that great, but there could have been something great about it. There could have been something really interesting about it. And so that disappoints me for Adam. That disappoints me for Adam, because he didn't have somebody who could help him along to say, "Hey, this is kind of interesting. Explore this. Explore this a little bit." That's just my thought about it. Sorry for the rant. But I guess, having looked at this, he talks about Jesse Eisenberg as, playing Lex Luthor with devilish glee. In the film, Lex Luthor even says, quote, "If man won't kill God, the devil will do it," unquote. See, all of this could be connected. It could be the review could be about Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor and how he's the devil in the film. Ooh, that would be so good. I'd be so into that. I would love reading that. But I'm starting to see now why Adam thinks that the experience of watching BBS is empty. Doesn't it make so much more sense now that we see that, like, he's not really connecting dots. He doesn't understand what is happening, because he says religious allegory instead of Christian allegory, so he's not connecting those dots. I'm starting to understand why he sees a BBS as empty, because he didn't even attempt to do any kind of film analysis whatsoever. So of course he's not going to get anything out of it, because he didn't even. To me, reading this, it makes me think he didn't even attempt it. There's no analysis here whatsoever. While I'm at a stopping point, I'm going to hop back into the chat and see what David has to say, because David, blow it up a live chat. I love it. Let's see. David says, "I like how Superman echoes a savior allegorically, but his story is still secular enough with enough differences that it's not a real ripoff of Jesus." Well, of course, he's not going to be exactly the Jesus Christ of the New Testament. There's no way he could ever do that. But you could, as a viewer, you could watch it just for the secular take of it, that Superman fights Doomsday and he dies and he comes back to life. Okay, you could read it that way, or you could see it for the intended references and the nods to the Passion story and the Passion narrative. So you could see it both ways. You could acknowledge it, or you could not, but they're both there. David says he died saving the world, talking about Superman, but he wasn't literally crucified on the 4 extremities. Instead, it's a variation of Centurion stabs Jesus in the ribs after he officially died. And then David says he died saving the world, but the people he inspired are going to take way more than just faith, belief to achieve salvation in the future, because the adversary is also very material. That's an interesting point. David says, "I'm not a Christian yet, so it's no skin off my back how closely they do the allegory, but we do, however, live in a world where a lot of audience in the 1960s were angry at Stanley Kubrick, for daring to show Spartacus dying on a wooden cross. Like, isn't the whole point that the Romans severely underestimated Jesus and killed him as a common criminal, but Jesus' sacrifice turns to be a very common method? That's true. Crucifixion was just the way that they punish criminals. So there would have been other criminals crucified on the cross. When Jesus was crucified, there were two other criminals alongside him. So it was a very common thing. So Spartacus could have died on a wooden cross just like that. And it would have, to me, been totally understandable in terms of the history of it all. Common method. I'm trying to follow David's thoughts. So Jesus' sacrifice turns a very common method of execution into a symbol of life after death and salvation of both body and soul. Question mark, question mark, question mark. Like, excuse me, that both in history and in the Bible, they didn't invent a method whole cloth to execute Jesus. And then David concludes his thoughts. But yes, you can also see Superman as a very Christian values character. So thank you for sharing those thoughts. It's always interesting to hear somebody who isn't a Christian talk about those things. So thank you for sharing those. Again, David is very, at least biblically literate to at least understand the concepts and understand the reasons for including something like that and being able to connect the dots to the story. That's why it's important to have some knowledge of the Bible, even if you're not a Christian. All right, so I'm going to fix my headphones once again. This happens when I get my hair cut and the headphones slip. So my apologies for starting again, stopping and starting again. All right, so continuing on into the review, we don't have much left. David writes, quote, simple enough, but the story, credited to screenwriters Chris Terrio and David S. Goyer, still manages to be convoluted and struggles to ignite fireworks the way a showdown between the two comic icons should. Once bats and soups do meet, it's all brute force, which is the only language Snyder speaks. Previous Batman movies worked because they were grounded in some semblance of reality. But it's hard to take something seriously when the characters are being tossed through cinder block walls and shoved through concrete floors for 1/3 of the running time, unquote. So I have a couple questions. How is the story convoluted? I'd like to hear thoughts on that. And how does it, quote, struggle to ignite fireworks, unquote? Because this part of it is actually really kind of funny, because when you think about it, the showdown between the, quote, two comic icons, unquote, literally sets up an atomic bomb being set out into outer space and blowing up in outer space. I mean, I think those are some pretty serious fireworks myself. So I just wanted to point that out. Adam writes, quote, once bats and soups do meet, it's all brute force, which is the only language Snyder speaks, unquote. The only one? Are we sure about that? What about all those quiet, more introspective sequences in the film? Like the funeral sequences at the beginning and at the end? What about the moments of Lois Lane dealing with the aftermath of Africa in her apartment and finding the bullet? Those are very quiet and introspective moments from Lois. What about Superman flying home to Kansas to get advice from his mother? They stand outside of the farmhouse with the twinkling stars at night, and it's really tranquil and peaceful there. What about Clark Kent finding solitude with the ghost of his father? What about the death of Superman with a choir in the, not literally there, but a choir in the score singing over him? It's very reverent and quiet in that moment. Saying that it's the only language Snyder speaks, the brute force is the only language Snyder speaks as a director. I'm sorry, just calling it like it is. It's a lie. It's a lie. It's a hyperbolic lie. It's just not true. It's not the only language that he speaks as a director. And then Adam also writes that previous Batman movies worked because they were grounded in some semblance of reality, but it's hard to take something seriously when the characters are being tossed through cinder block walls and shoved through concrete floors 1/3 of the running time, unquote. But Adam, I have a question. I thought you wanted a superhero film to be fun. I thought you wanted it to be comic booky. Comic book characters throw each other through cinder block walls. That's just what happens in comic book stories. So if you wanted it to be fun, that's in there for you as a comic book, a piece of comic book fun. If you're gonna have Superman in your film, I hate to break it to you, but people are probably gonna get tossed through cinder block walls. That's the difference between BVS and the other Batman movies that you saw. Those other Batman movies, they didn't have Superman in them. They didn't have a superpowered Kryptonian in them. That's what makes them different. That's why it's not a fair comparison, because Superman wasn't in it. So that's the truth. All right, so continuing on, let's see. Adam writes, quote, Detroit has a starring role in much of the chaos. Early scenes depict downtown Detroit as metropolis, including Fort Street, Fort Street between Griswold Street and Washington Boulevard. The Russell Industrial Center gets a glimpse or two. And Michigan Central Station is the backdrop for much of the big showdown between the two titans. These are all very weirdly written sentences. And then he puts in parentheses, quote, the building is also a favorite of Michael Bay, making it a premier location for directors who confuse loud clanging as substance, unquote, in parentheses, unquote. I actually kind of like this section of the review because it adds value to me as a reader. I don't know about these Detroit locations. This is not something that I would have known about because I don't live in Detroit. So this is actually giving me something that I probably wouldn't get out of another one of these reviews. This is a local Detroit citizen who is sharing the perspective of a local citizen and has knowledge about the film shooting locations and where they are and what's important about them. So I like that aspect of this paragraph, but I think it's strange for Adam to just shove in a Michael Bay comparison in there while doing it. I guess maybe he's justifying it that, oh, Michael Bay also used this building, and so that makes it the same. It kind of destroys the section of this section of the review for me. Like, you were doing something really kind of cool there. You could have explored Batman v Superman, and I don't want to like tell Adam what to write about, of course, but for me as a reader, I would have enjoyed it a little more if there was more of this in his review. He has the expertise and the knowledge and the perspective of somebody who lived in Detroit, where a lot of this film was shot. That could have been an interesting take on the film and looking at it from that angle, because I actually think this is a pretty cool section of the review up until the Michael Bay comparison. So that's unfortunate that there's only that much of it in here. Okay, so getting to the end here, Adam writes, quote, there's plenty more, including the introduction of Wonder Woman, played by Gal Gadot, and glimpses at several other eventual Justice League members and a late-in-the-game villain who raises the level of cacophony several thousand decibels. Oh, it's so loud. Batman v Superman is so loud. But by the end, this is how Adam ends his review. By the end, it feels what it must be like to go 12 rounds with Batman and Superman. It's a supersized headache, unquote. Yes, the idea of the Batman-Superman fight is to make you understand as a viewer what it would be like if these two titans of comic books fought each other. Yes, I want to know what it feels like to go 12 rounds with Batman and Superman. Yes, that's what I want as a viewer, to understand what that's like, what them fighting would be like. Well, how is that a negative? Maybe it's just me. I don't understand how that's a negative. But he does end the review with, it's a supersized headache, which I guess sort of plays into his title about it being an exhausting showdown. So I guess those kinds of things go together. But what I think is really interesting about the end of this review for me is that we've gone through Adam's thoughts. We've read all the way through, read every single word that he wrote. And he gave this film a C out of an American grading system from the education system. He gave it a C. A is the best. F is a failing grade. C is a passing grade. So the only thing he wrote in this review that he thought was a positive was Ben Affleck in a suit. But yet he gave it a C. He gave it a passing grade. That's fascinating to me. He didn't give it an F. I would have thought after reading this entire review, he would have given it a failing grade. Why didn't he? Why did he give it a C? To me, that means if we're looking at this through the education system, if you get a C, that means the student got some answers right on the test. He, the student didn't get all the answers wrong on the test. There must have been some answers that the student got right. So what about BBS? Um, uh, gave it a passing grade. That's what I would want to know. I'm so surprised by the C grading because after reading that whole review of how loud the film is, you think he would have given it an F. Why give it a C? That's a really I'm trying to balance these two things. We get the thoughts of the complete negativity surrounding this film and the passing grade. How do those things go together? I don't even know. Um yeah. I mean it's strange. Like a lot of this review is really strange. Like for some reason Adam is confused that the introduction of Doomsday involves cacophony. Well, of course it is. Of course it's going to involve cacophony. Doomsday is a destructive machine that just, well, not machine, not technically. Like I say that in a metaphorical sense. Doomsday just wants to destroy things. Of course, it's going to be cacophony and just loud destruction. That's just what Doomsday is for. So there's a lot of that in this review that it's putting things under the film that it's not supposed to be, and then it's the trying to understand the 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 thoughts behind the review and understanding the outcome of the review. It's very, very strange to me. This was a really weird review to me. Trying to understand it. So I don't know. Maybe Adam is now a great lover of film. Maybe his reviews are getting better. I think this one maybe needed some work. Maybe needed some editing. Maybe needed some direction on parts of it. But I appreciate that Adam took the time to write the review. I just think there are some problems with it. I guess that's a fair thing to say. I don't want to say anything personally about Adam, but I do think there are some problems with the way this is conducted. This review is sort of conducted, put together, written out. So that's kind of the conclusion I come to with this one. Just to wrap up some thoughts from the live chat, David writes, yeah, I really do like the ratio of quiet and action moments. I think BBS does a great job with that. And then David also says the action scenes end up pretty cathartic when they happen. I agree. Well, I think that is going to do it for this week's live stream. Hopefully, I'm going to try to be somewhat consistent. I don't know. I'm going to be traveling here a lot lately in the next little bit, so it's going to be tough to do some of these live streams. When I'm going to try to do them when I'm available. So, my apologies to everyone who wanted these to be weekly, and I certainly do. But sometimes traveling and being out of on vacation or out of town, it's hard to do them. But if you ever wonder when I'm going to be live, just check this YouTube channel, youtube.com/duckmilkprod. I'll be scheduling streams in advance when I am available. So just hang out there, set a reminder through YouTube, and I'll go live when I am available. If you missed this live and you want to share your thoughts, I hope you'll consider sharing them in the comment section below. You can still tell me what you thought about this review and how it approached Batman v Superman, and I would love to hear your thoughts. And as always, we look at a lot of these reviews that personally, in my opinion, don't do a really great job. So I know we talk about reviews here that don't maybe do the best job, but if you think that there is a Batman v Superman review out there that is actually really thoughtful and analyzes the film really well, I would love to read that as well. So please send those to me if you've got them, and I will share them. I'll share them with the class. So please do that if you want to send me something, if you want to send something my way. All right. Well, I think we're at the point of the live stream where I'm going to hand it back over to voiceover Rebecca, and she's going to take us out of here. If you would like to see more of these live streams, make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel at youtube.com/duckmilkprod. If you'd like to keep in touch with me personally, you can follow me on Instagram at the Derby Kid and on Vero at Derby Kid. You can hear my thoughts on the CW Supergirl TV series and all things Kara Zor-El over at Supergirl Radio by visiting supergirlradio.com, subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts, or subscribing to the DC TV Podcast YouTube channel, which you can find at youtube.com/DCTV Podcasts. Also, please check out the Justice League Universe podcast for in-depth analysis on the DCEU films, including Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. And before I go, I hope that this live stream video series will inspire you to think more critically and thoughtfully about film and storytelling. I'd like to leave you with this quote from C.S. Lewis's book titled An Experiment in Criticism. "The truth is not that we need the critics in order to enjoy the authors, but that we need the authors to enjoy the critics." My name is Rebecca Johnson, and I love Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. And I am publishing a series of videos exploring the reasons why I am such a fan of Zack Snyder's film. In this series, you'll find my thoughts on topics that matter to me, like Larry Fong's cinematography, character analysis on Lex Luthor and Lois Lane, the Christian imagery, what I find hopeful about the movie, and yes, I'll address the critical reception. So if you're interested in any of those topics, I hope you will get something out of this series and find out why Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice has had such a profound, heartfelt, and inspiring impact on my life.